Hello, everyone. I wanted to do a little PSA for you guys today. I'm not sure if you guys have ever heard of the killer chemical called dihydrogen monoxide. It's actually the largest component of acid rain, and it's found in most viruses and bacteria. Even the smallest amount of dihydrogen monoxide is actually enough to kill an adult human being, and it can be found all over planet Earth. To shorten it, we'll call it DHMO. Now, you might be asking, what is dihydrogen monoxide? Well, think about it. It's two hydrogens and one oxygen. What does that mean? It's water. That's right. This killer evil substance is water. Two hydrogens and one oxygen makes a pretty interesting bond. Now, I'm sure you guys know all the crazy things about water, like 70 or more percent of the planet's water, 70% of the human is water. Without it, you'll die. But what makes water so special? Water is an interesting molecule because it can actually bond to itself with a sort of magnetic adherence, and that's what we call surface tension. It's also the ability that allows water to erode materials and really carry away solids and work for the really kind of the blood of life for everything. So next time you think about diving into a pool, remember all the things that water actually does for you. So in previous videos, we've talked about different types of water and what different types of water are good for your fish tank. And where we left it last time is really well water is what you're going to want to use. Pretty much whatever your well is, your fish are going to acclimate to and be okay with. And that's a good source because it will stay consistent. It's readily available, and you have a lot of it to use, too. So, with that, whenever you're acclimating new fish, the only thing you're going to need to check for is the pH of the water. Now, if your water is like an 8, and the water that the fish is living in is a 6, you're going to have to acclimate the fish. Whether that be changing the water in your fish tank to make it more basic, in turn raising the pH, or adding carbonates to your fish tank to raise the pH, like baking soda or some other calcium molecule. So, past that, the pH is a really important aspect of water, and that's going to determine really the amount of hydrogen ions that are in your fish tank, and that determines whether it's acidic or basic. Now, most fish prefer a basic environment of anywhere from really anything above 7 they're going to be happy with. If your pH is below 7, you're going to have to add carbonates to it to bring it to a basic place so that the fish can survive in it. That being said, if you have fish that are surviving in a pH of 6, that's okay. They have been known to do it. They will acclimate to the pH and thrive. Just remember what that pH is, because if you add new fish in and they're at a different pH, they can die very quickly from what's known as pH shock. So that's really the only thing in your tank you should be testing on a regular basis. We do sell kits for testing pH, and I will show you those in just a moment. Alrighty, let's talk about the rest of the parameters for your fish tank. I'm sure many of you know that there's things like nitrates, nitrites, and ammonia that a lot of people test for, but the truth of the matter is you don't really need to test for them. If your aquarium has been set up correctly and your fish are surviving, your nitrate levels will be well within acceptable ranges, and so will your nitrates and your ammonia levels. So don't worry about those too much. The pH is the only one you should really be keeping an eye on. If you notice any of those are really out of whack, or you just can't seem to get the tank under control, you can always add more sand. Seems to be a pretty surefire way of stabilizing the chemistry in a fish tank. Alright, so when it comes to testing your pH, there's two main ways to do it. You can either use the test strips or the liquid test solution. Most of us are going to tell you to use the test solution, fatherfish included. Now, the reason we say that is because it's much harder to mess up a liquid test solution than it is to mess up the strips. So I'm going to show you how to do both. We'll start with the strip. Now, what you're going to do with the strip is you're going to dunk it down in the water, swish it around just a little bit. You don't want to shake any of the chemicals off. Don't flick it. Just hold it up to here and match the color. So right here is going to be our pH. And we're looking right around 8.0 to 8.5, which is pretty basic, but actually okay for what I'm keeping in there. So from the same tank, we're also going to do a liquid test. So the front of the bottle will have instructions on it. It says add 3 drops. Now, the only thing you have to pay attention to when you do this is what angle you have the bottle at and how many drops you do. So we're going to make sure the angle is the same every time, and to do that, we're going to make sure it's straight up and down. 1, 2, 3 drops, that easy. You don't really need to shake this, you just need to mix it up. So I put the lid on, flip it over twice, make sure it's all mixed. Now, on the box that it came with, or inside the box that it came with, it will actually have a little test card. Now this is saying that the water is more basic than 7.6, which for most people is good enough. You don't need the high range pH test kit. You can just get away with the regular range pH test kit. And if it's dark blue like that, you know it's higher than 7.6, and it's probably not much higher. And we know it's probably around 8.3, but in all actuality, those test strips are not very accurate, and this water is probably more like an 8. And that's evident from the dark blue on the freshwater color card. So why this is important is, like we said, if you're going to be acclimating fish to this tank, you need to know what the pH is of both the water the fish came from and the water the fish is going into. So you would test both the bag that your fish is coming in with and the water in your tank. And then what you need to do is match the water in your tank to the water in your bag. The complication here is when you have fish in your tank already, you have to be very slow with the acclimation process as to not shock them. Alrighty everybody, I'm just going to do a quick discussion of total hardness and dissolved hardness in your water to try and make this a little easier on some people. If you understand this topic well, this might be a little simple for you, but I don't think a lot of people get this. So let's imagine this tub right here is our fish tank, and what we're going to do is we're going to add things to it to simulate a fish tank. So the first thing we're going to add is oxygen. We're going to say that these spongy things are dissolved oxygen in the fish tank. That's what your fish need to breathe. So we're going to start with one of those. You definitely need that in there. You're also going to want some fish, probably. Fish are going to take up a lot of the tank. So let's imagine you start dissolving solids in the fish tank, like carbonates. Now, as you notice, this tank is going to fill very, very quickly. And actually, in no time at all, I cannot actually add any more rocks. So what happens if you try to pump more oxygen into it? It doesn't seem to want to go in. What happens if I try and make it more basic by adding carbonates to it? Well, it worked a little bit. Let's see if we can get any more oxygen in there. Nope. Now this is very similar to how water actually works. It can only hold so much at once. So let's change the water. Let's remove most of the things in it. So now we have some oxygen in here. Let's dissolve more oxygen. Let's get a lot of oxygen dissolved in here. Alright, now that the oxygen's dissolved, our pH has gone down. So we need to add carbonates into it to bring the pH back up. Well, now we're at a point where we have the oxygen we need in the tank, but I can't seem to get enough carbonates in here to get it where I need it. They keep falling out. Kind of like water. If your water's hard enough, it will actually begin to precipitate minerals back out of it. The only reason this is important for a fish tank is one of the ways you control pH is by adding carbonates to it, which will in turn increase the hardness. And there is a point at which the hardness will be so high you can no longer dissolve solids into your fish tank. This is the main reason that we change our water. The water only has so much capacity for different things to be dissolved in it, whether it's the fish living in it, whether it's the dissolved solids or the oxygen. Eventually you're going to have to change that out for some fresh water. And there's no shame in that. Fish need it once in a while. Alright everybody, the last thing I'd like to talk to you about today is your water's temperature. Now I'm sure, as a lot of you know from the last videos, that having the correct temperature water not only helps keep your fish healthy, but is also required for proper biology to take place. Father Fish says the best temperature for your water is 82 degrees, and I find this to be true. I typically set mine anywhere between 80 and 85, and 82 to 83 is what it comes out to, and that will work just fine for your tank. And that's not going to hurt any fish, and there's a lot of fish that actually need water that warm, like discus. So keep an eye on your temperature. There's a lot of heaters on the market. The best ones will actually die when they die. Some of the cheaper ones will run continuously and actually cook your fish. So that's one thing you need to monitor, is the temperature of the water. The last thing I would like to mention is stress. Now, it's hard to gauge how your fish are feeling, seeing as they don't really talk, they have no telepathic abilities that we're aware of, and their sign language is a little lackluster. So how do you tell if your fish isn't doing good? Well, there's a few obvious signs. If your fish is swimming upside down, that's usually a pretty good indicator it's not doing the greatest. You know, if your fish has stress marks on it, like little spots that aren't white, if they're little white spots, that's probably ick and you need to increase your water temperature. If they're just generic little stripes or spots, that could be a sign of stress. If your fish is a fish that's known to be out and about and is constantly hiding and behaving erratically, all of these suggest to you that your fish is uncomfortable or stressed. The easiest way to solve these problems is to change 50% of your water daily. You can do this until you're comfortable or the pH is at an acceptable level, or whatever is occurring to make your fish stressed has ceased. It will not hurt your fish to change 50% of the water daily. Enough of the dissolved solids will stay in solution that the bacteria will continue to thrive. And all you're really doing is pulling out whatever is stressing out your fish. Just don't be afraid to get your hands wet and suck some of that dirt out and get some fresh water in there. Well, I want to thank everybody for watching, and I hope you guys have a great night. Goodbye.